Yeah, so today I'm going to talk about cleaning data. And in the big data world, there's lots of different options. There's coldish, like file storage. There's warm data, like data warehouses, data lakehouses. Then we have hot data. And when I put hot start, it's like the stuff that's on the cloud, right? And the cool thing is they all use CQL, which is one of my main things that I love about Cassandra is that you can start using Cassandra, but there's so many different Cassandras out there, right? And that just means that your skill can be applied in different scenarios. Now, cleaning big data, how is it different than cleaning little data or medium data? And it's basically the same. So I would say it's the same shit, different day. But the problem is that you can clean data in the data engineering, meaning as the data is coming in. But what if you don't do that when you get the data in, right? What happens after the fact? Well, you have petabytes of information to go through it in Cassandra, unless you've obviously, put it in a partition key or whatever, it's going to take more effort. In SQL, relational databases, it's very simple. You figure out what you want to do by, finding what you want to delete, and you delete it. And you don't necessarily have to just do deletions. You could do select blah, 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 insert into this other place, right? Or select as and do all these functions, and you can say insert into this other place, and it would just work. And, when I got into big data, especially Cassandra, because it has CQL, which looks like SQL, I was expecting something like that. And there really isn't. But now with Spark SQL, you can kind of do that, right? So there are certain databases or data stores that are connected to Spark SQL where you can kind of do the same thing, right? And that's amazing if your database supports it. And the New York Spark connectors, you can do some cool stuff. But for the most part, you're not going to always get what you want with Spark SQL, because again, it's a subset. It's Hive, so it's a subset of SQL. But if you're lucky, you can do the same things. Now, the surefire way of cleaning data in big data, depending on which version of Cassandra you have, which version of Spark you have, is to just have a function that you make. And here's an example where it's deleting a category of information in a big database of documents, and you can even parameterize this further along. But the benefit is that you have much more control over your filter criteria. You have much more control over what you would like to do once you find your information. So in this case, we select using Spark and we delete using CQL, using a CQL deriver session. Deduping is a little bit harder. It's not as intuitive. I don't take credit for writing the middle code, which is do something with deduping. It's just something I found on Stack Overflow, and I got it to work, and I've been using it over and over, and it works. And this is the cool thing about Spark is once you get something to work, you can wrap it in a function, either in a Python function, Scala, or Java, and then you can share it with people, and that's great until you have to do things like migration of tons and tons of information. Cleaning of tons and tons of information for hundreds of tables or hundreds of key spaces. And that's where Airflow comes in. Airflow in this case is showing this diagram is showing a directed acyclic graph of all the things that we want to do to delete or move a big application that has lots of information. And we can't just say, take all these tables, shove them from one place to the other. What if we have other things that we'd like to do? What if we want to move a subset of that information? And what we did was we looked at this thing called Spark Migrator, Scylla Migrator. Somebody else has written that software, and we adapted it to clean data. So we took a part of the engine, ripped it apart, and said, we like the way it selects information, but we're going to also apply some deletion in here. And using the same directed acyclic graph that we made for migration of data, we started to use it to clean data. So we could say, this particular set of tables in this particular set of key spaces, let's move that information. Now, here are some considerations, right? If you're going to use Spark with Airflow, figure out, if you really want to manage it or run it. Like for the most part, when you're moving or deleting data, you don't really need to run the Spark cluster forever, right? So like, see if Elastic MapReduce works, or see if Google Dataproc works for you, right? Or Databricks works for you. Same thing with Airflow. There are AWS's Airflow as a service. Google Composer is kind of like an Airflow as a service. So you don't have to necessarily manage these things. And other like key things about Spark is that if you compile it, it can't be modified, and that's really useful. So key takeaways, right? Don't reinvent the wheel. right? Use Apache Spark. Like when you're dealing with Cassandra and you're dealing with moving or cleaning information, you can't really, go wrong with using Spark. All right, it's like not getting fired for hiring IBM. And then in terms of a scheduler, you have lots of different options. Now, Apache Airflow with Python is the lowest common denominator, but there are other things like Luigi, Prefect. You could even use Jenkins to schedule the jobs for cleaning and migrating data. But there's so many different options available with Airflow. You can't go wrong. Try it out. Thanks so much, guys. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Rahul. It's good to see you. And fantastic talk there. I'm going to have to put Airflow on the top of my projects to take a look at. It's pretty fantastic.
Yeah, thanks Rahul. Great job. And data cleaning is definitely a kind of an overlooked art that kind of deserves a lot of attention in these circumstances, because that takes, when I was starting with this sort of thing, it's like that took a lot of the ramp up effort, is making sure that, like, wait a second, why is this in my data? Oh, and they kind of have to have that step back moment. So thanks so much, and good to see you,
guys.
sort of.
Absolutely.